The Jets have fired head coach Robert Salah. It's going to be a very popular move in the fan base, but it's not going to fix the underlying problems with this team. Let's discuss why today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from gangreennation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, this is our second episode of the day here on Tuesday. And you know, if we're doing a second episode, it has to be because there's big news. And there was enormous news that broke Tuesday morning. The Jets have fired head coach Robert Salah. We're going to talk about what this means for the Jets going forward. We're going to talk about why this should have been done back in January. But first, we're going to talk about why this doesn't really change the underlying problems with this football team. Now, I've been pretty consistent over the last couple of weeks, my views on Robert Salah. In fact, I think I've been pretty consistent, going back to last season, my views on Robert Salah. I think firing him is absolutely a justified move. I think if you look at the performance, there just have not been enough wins. He had 3 straight losing seasons to begin his career. Very rare that you get a 4th season when you start your career with 3 straight losing seasons with the team. The record's not been good enough. The offense has been dismal during his tenure. The team has not played aggressively enough. His in-game decisions have been very shaky. I think we can say Robert Salah is a bad head coach. And over the last couple of weeks, the team's performance has been to the point where I think a firing has been justified. And I've said this on the show in the past. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets, and we have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. I've said that I think there are 2 reasons you make an in-season coaching change. One is if you have somebody on your staff who you think can right the ship. And the second is if you think that things are so bad with your head coach that it's worth just changing things up for the sake of changing things up, and maybe you can strike lightning in a bottle with somebody else. Maybe just a change in the dynamics can spark something in your team. I think the Jets were clearly in the latter category. I have no issues with the Jets changing coaches today, but I think that the Jets are trying to sell this as everything will be fine now. All reports indicate that this was not a decision made by general manager Joe Douglas. This was a Woody Johnson decision. And I've been covering the Jets for a long time, and I've been following the Jets for an even longer time. So I know the way Woody Johnson thinks pretty well. He operates in some pretty distinctive ways. And one of the issues with Woody Johnson is Woody Johnson doesn't want to be bothered with the hard business of building a quality football team, because it's tough. You need to do things like value your draft picks. You need to focus on the premium positions. You need to invest in a scouting staff. You need to manage your cap correctly. Woody Johnson's not about that. Woody Johnson is always about the quick fix. He always thinks that there's like this one silver bullet that can fix your team. And the issue that I have right now with Woody Johnson, it's not that he fired Robert Salah, who's a bad coach who the Jets will not miss. Like, let's be honest with that. I don't think anybody should be shedding a tear for Robert Salah. He was very lucky to get even the start of a 4th season. My issue is just more what this says about the big picture of the way the Jets run things, where Woody Johnson always thinks the team's closer than it is, and he thinks that like one move will solve all the problems. And you see this happen when the Jets make a move for a big player that he pushes. And now you're seeing it when he fires the head coach. I'm sure in Woody Johnson's mind, he's got this idea that this is a 12 or 13 win team, and what's holding them back is the head coach. And once we get rid of the head coach, that's fine. Woody always thinks that there's like this one move you can make that will solve everything. And why am I saying that? Well, because the offensive coordinator is still here. The offensive line coach is still here. And if we're talking for coaches who are responsible for this poor start this season, that's where we'd start. That's where we'd go. Now, if Nathaniel Hackett and Keith Carter, at least Hackett, were on their way out the door, this is a different discussion. Then we can say, you know what, the Jets are really trying. There's only so much you can do in season, but the Jets are trying to address the root problems on this team, because the way this offense is coordinated is a problem. It's a very unimaginative offense. It's not an offense that puts any stress on opposing defenses. The play design is bad. The lack of creative formations are bad. There's nothing cutting edge about this offense. And the offensive line, where the Jets have underperforming players, But there are too many instances where guys don't know their assignments, and that goes directly to coaching, especially when we're talking the offensive line coach. I'm a big skeptic about, how much credit or how much blame position coaches get for their unit's performance. But offensive line is one area that's an exception, because on an offensive line, you have 5 guys and they need to work as a unit, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And you've seen through the years, many offensive line coaches get more out of their players than their collective talent would suggest they're capable of. And Keith Carter is getting less out of the Jets offensive line than their talent level would suggest. These guys are still here. And firing Robert Salah, look, I've complained a lot about how this team was not ready to play. I've complained a lot about Salah's philosophical issues, because Salah is the guy who coined the phrase "the race to 20" last year. His philosophy is not that we need to score a lot of points in the NFL of 2024. His idea is that we let the defense win. We try and win a low-scoring game, and that just doesn't work in today's NFL. I'm skeptical of the way Salah manages games. I don't think he's aggressive enough. I don't think he uses analytics enough. These things could improve under Jeff Ulbrich. And Salah has reached a point where he's so clearly out of his element that I think a change was justified. But I don't think we can sit here today and say the season's saved. I think too many Jets fans, and quite frankly, the owner, are looking for some magical move that's going to resurrect this team. Look, firing Robert Salah will improve the things that I mentioned. Firing Robert Salah will not make Aaron Rodgers 7 years younger. And if we're talking about issues on this team right now, I think you have to look to Rodgers, who's not a bad quarterback, not completely washed up, but a guy who's clearly in decline. Does not move anywhere near as well as he did in the past. That's an issue. Guy who's afraid of being hit, guy whose body may not hold up the rest of the season. That's a problem. The play of the offensive line, and the coach. Look, if you want to say coaching, the coach who's responsible for the offensive line is still here. The play of the offense, which Salah is ultimately responsible for the results, but he's not the guy implementing the offense. The guys who are implementing the offense are still here. And as we talked about on our first episode today, Jets have some guys who are underperforming. And I don't know, maybe firing Salah will put a spark into them, but Sauce Gardner is not having a Sauce Gardner season. Quinnen Williams is not having a Quinnen Williams season. Breece Hall is not having a Breece Hall season. Garrett Wilson, we started to see some flashes the second half, so maybe he's starting to turn it around, but Jets have too many other big-time players who just aren't producing big-time results. Now, again, maybe seeing this coaching change lights a fire under the team. I think in the short run, sometimes you see a team get fired up. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Jets come out with a lot of emotion Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. But I think if we're looking for something that's going to save the season, I think if we're looking for something that would get rid of a bad coach, then you found it. If you're looking for a move that was justified, you found it. If you're looking for a move that is going to radically change the trajectory of the 2024 New York Jets, well, you've solved a few problems, but there are a lot more problems that remain. This team's problems, look, head coach was a problem, but there were many, many deeper problems. And I think when the owner looks at this team, it's not so much that he's not objective, it's that he doesn't know what he's watching. He thought that we traded for Aaron Rodgers and we're a Super Bowl team. So now that the Jets aren't looking like a Super Bowl team, he has to find somebody to scapegoat. And look, I'm not saying scapegoat in the sense Robert Salah is blameless. Robert Salah has earned a lot of the blame. Robert Salah deserved to be fired. I am not shedding any tears for Robert Salah. But I think when we're talking about expectations, and we're talking about just the overall way the team was run, this is vintage Jets. This is vintage Woody Johnson. And one of the ways it's vintage Woody Johnson is that the Jets delayed a move that should have been made 9 months ago, a move that if it was made 9 months ago would have left the team in a much better position. As we continue here on this special Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets, we'll talk about the really confusing way the Jets have handled Robert Salah, because it's very difficult to figure out a justification for firing him today and not firing him back in January. That's as we continue here on this special Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets, breaking down the firing of Robert Salah. This special edition of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with big returns on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Jets have replaced Robert Salah with Jeff Ulbrich, Who knows what that's going to do to the betting line this week as the Jets take on the Buffalo Bills Monday Night Football at MetLife Stadium. At this point, Buffalo remains a 2.5-point favorite, so the line has not moved yet as a result of the coaching change. But FanDuel's the place to get in on the action. Because if you think Jeff Ulbrich's going to spark the Jets, well, again, the Jets are you're getting 2.5 points. And FanDuel will give you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, it's FanDuel, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This special edition of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. We got to get a class for how to run an NFL offense and subscribe to Nathaniel Hackett and Keith Carter. That'd be the next great move for Hillsdale College. But all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes like this one when there's big news. And there doesn't get much bigger news than a team making an in-season coaching change. And that's what the New York Jets have done by firing head coach Robert Salah. I'm surprised that this happened from the standpoint that Woody Johnson has never made a coaching change in his 25 years as Jets owner in season. In fact, the Jets have even suggested in the past that their policy was to wait till the end of the season to make a coaching change. Things changed today with the firing of Robert Salah. And through the years, I've watched a lot of teams, obviously not the Jets, because the Jets have never made an in-season coaching change under Woody Johnson, but I've watched other teams fire their coaches around this time of year. And I've always had the same thought when it's happened. If you were going to fire him 5 weeks into the season, why didn't you just fire him at the end of last season? Because if you're entering a year where your coach is on such a hot seat that a few early losses get him fired, it's clear you don't have a lot of confidence in him. It's clear that you are well aware of his shortcomings. And it's clear that you know that there are issues with the leadership of your football team. And I think this through. What are the issues with Robert Salah this year? The team's not ready to play games. The offense is stagnant. He's hired bad offensive coaches. His philosophies seem behind the times. What issue with Robert Salah exists today that did not exist back in January? Tell me. There is none. And the fact that Woody Johnson made this move today, it suggests to me that he understood that Robert Salah had problems, that there were significant problems. Because again, you don't get fired this early in the season on a whim. You get fired this early in the season because the people running the team realize there are issues with you and you are like on your last straw. If you're that close to being fired, and if you have that little confidence in a head coach, why didn't you just fire him last year at the end of the 2023 season? Because there aren't many examples of head coaches who miss the playoffs 3 straight years and then go on to have success with their team. There aren't many examples of coaches who miss the playoffs 3 straight years who get to stay with their team, especially not in today's NFL. And you knew that this coach had this many issues. And yet you're talking your team up as though you want to go to the Super Bowl. So this critical year where you are a Super Bowl contender, or at least you think you're a Super Bowl contender, you put it in the hands of a coach you have no confidence in. Because you clearly have no confidence in him if 2 losses, back-to-back losses, are enough to get you to dismiss him. And part of me feels like, talking about what we did in the first segment, there's so many other issues with this team right now. It feels to me like the Jets are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. When back in January, you could have built a sturdier boat. If you had fired Robert Salah back in January, maybe you can go get Jim Harbaugh. Maybe you can go get some other coach. Maybe you can get somebody who can build a team around Aaron Rodgers and make this thing worthwhile. I mean, look, I don't mean to disrespect Jeff Ulbrich, but this is going to be a very, very difficult spot for Ulbrich. I think a head coach with a lot of head coaching experience would be hard pressed to come into this situation where you're in the New York media where you have this team with such high expectations, where you're such a high profile team, and where the season feels like it's sinking right now, and your job is to right this ship. Again, we're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic when we needed a better boat. I don't understand how you can justify this. I heard the expression among a lot of Jets fans today, better late than never. Yes, they should have fired Robert Salah in January, but at least they're admitting their mistake and moving forward. I don't understand why we have to give the Jets grace for this. I don't understand why we just have to dismiss the Jets messing this up. I mean, yeah, better late than never. How about better on time than late? That's better on time than late seems like a pretty basic concept to me. Doesn't that seem like a basic concept to you? Try better late than never with your wife. Try better late than never with your boss. If you're a student, try better late than never with your teacher. I think the answer is better on time than late, much better on time than late, because right now you're going to try and make it work with a coaching staff. I mean, these were Salah's subordinates. These were the guys Salah hired. If you don't like Salah, these are the guys he brought in. And we know Salah's weakness in building a staff, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And you did not get rid of any of them. So I don't, like if you brought in a new coach, you could have completely reshaped the way this team was run. Now you're essentially going with Robert Salah's top lieutenant. And, maybe Jeff Ulbrich's up to the job. I certainly hope he is. I certainly hope he can right the ship. But this is an enormous challenge right now. This is not a move that's made from a position of strength. Let's be clear here. This is a move made from a state of desperation. And it's very, very rare that you see something like this work. Teams try and treat teams every year. There's a team or two that tries to salvage their season by making a head coaching change after the first couple of games. And it very, very rarely works. I mean, you have the Raiders a couple of years ago, but that was such a one-off experience because they had so many tough conditions they were going through that bonded the team. It just usually doesn't work because you're throwing an inexperienced coach for the most of the time into a situation that's completely unstable. I mean, if you were looking for stability, this is not how you do it. If you wanted the stability, a team built to weather a storm, you go out and you hire Jim Harbaugh back in January when he's available. You get rid of Robert Salah because nothing we know about Robert Salah now. And look, we know that there are issues with Robert Salah. We knew every single one of them back in January. So 2 losses suddenly change your perspective radically. I mean, what if Greg Zuerlein hits that kick against Denver? What if Aaron Rodgers hits that pass against Minnesota? What if the Jets are 4-1? I mean, the Jets are. I mean, there are 2 plays that have very little to do with, that have nothing to do with Robert Salah's coaching ability that would make this team 4-1, and then he's still here. The issue with Salah is that he's not a good coach. But again, the Jets are always reactive. The Jets are never proactive. The Jets bought into the whole, we went 7-10 last year without Rodgers, even though it was a very shaky 7-10. They got a bunch of lucky breaks in the early part of the season, then beat 2 of the 3 worst teams in the league, week 16 through 18. Instead of looking at the actual performance, we're once again reactive. We're not proactive. We're not addressing problems. We're waiting till a problem reaches a boiling point before we address it. And that's one of the reasons the Jets are in this position. And it's one of the stories of this ownership. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we've talked enough about Robert Salah. We've talked enough about Woody Johnson. Let's take a look forward. What does the Jets under Jeff Ulbrich as head coach have to look forward to? We'll discuss as we continue here on this special Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This special edition of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Well, I'm sure the ticket for Monday night against Buffalo just got hotter. It's sure to be a crazy crowd. Jets fans will welcome Jeff Ulbrich as their new head coach. And you should know that Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And the best part about Game Time to me is you get the view from your seat. They show you a picture of what it's going to look like from your seat before you go. So no surprises, no obstructed views. Everything's exactly as you expect once you arrive at your venue. And you can get great deals up to an hour before your event starts. So you want to go Jets Buffalo Monday, Game Time's the place to go. You want to go to any other event, whether it's sports, music, comedy, theater, Game Time's the place to go. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This is a special edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. The New York Jets have fired head coach Robert Salah after a 2-3 start to the 2024 season. Defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich has been promoted to interim head coach. So what does a Jets team under Jeff Ulbrich look like? And we're going to find out a lot. And the first thing I'm going to be interested in is how much autonomy Ulbrich has to name the coaching staff that he wants. And because we talked about how Woody Johnson's too much of a fool to fire Nathaniel Hackett or Keith Carter, the two coaches who absolutely needed to go. And you know something? If Hackett and Carter went out the door with Saleh, I'd at least come away thinking, you know what, Woody Johnson understands some of the problems. He's at least trying to get this team moving in the right direction. Instead, he just fires the head coach and leaves everybody else in place. The classic Woody maneuver, the cosmetic change that's really not going to do enough to fix the team. You want to know the thing that could get me to approve of Jeff Ulbrich immediately? Firing Nathaniel Hackett, firing Keith Carter, look, the guy who replaced Nathaniel Hackett's Todd Downing, most likely, and Downing's not much of an offensive coordinator, but he'd be better than Hackett. Look, the Jets offense would run better under Todd Downing. I don't think much of Todd Downing. That'd be the first move that Ulbrich made. That's what it should be. And we'll find out whether or not he actually has the authority to make changes to his coaching staff. Because if Woody Johnson's too much of a fool to do it, Ulbrich should. I think the second thing we'll learn is how much Ulbrich really had to do with the defense, because that's always the question. You always wonder when your head coach has an offensive background, you always wonder how much the offensive coordinator has to do with what you're doing on that side of the ball. And the same is true on defense. Robert Salah is the head coach. Jeff Ulbrich's the defensive coordinator. But of course, Salah comes from a defensive background. Ulbrich, it felt like, was very much implementing his vision. Ulbrich got a lot of credit the last couple of years when the Jets defense was good. My sense is that that's rightly so, because you know what, he had to be doing something, but we don't know how much he was in charge. I think we're going to find out a lot. And I'll go back to something I said in the first show I did today, is that I think there are a couple of tweaks the Jets need to make on the defensive side of the ball. Saleh liked to rush just 4 guys. And, you know, against New England, week 3, they blitzed a lot, but they kind of fell back away from that a little bit in the weeks that followed. I'm interested to see how frequently Ulbrich blitzes, because I think this defensive line's not in the place it was the last couple of years. It's not a major strength the way it was back in 2022 and 2023. And that's true both in terms of getting after the quarterback and in terms of stopping the run. And I think that the Jets not only need to blitz more, I think they need to leave the safety in the box more. And that means you're going to leave one-on-one matchups on the outside. The thing is, you've got the corners to do it. You've got Sauce Gardner. You've got DJ Reed. Name me a better 1-2 punch in the league at the corner position. In fact, throw in Michael Carter II in the slot. Name me a team that's got a better group of corners. When you have that group of corners and you're not as strong on the defensive line, I know Quinnen Williams is still there. We're hoping he picks his game up because he's not off to a good start. When you're that strong at corner and kind of weak on the defensive line, I mean, outside of Quinnen Williams, Will McDonald's really the only guy you can count on to generate any sort of pressure on that line. You got to lean on your corners. I think there are some other questions with Ulbrich, and I think one of the, it's very easy the easy thing to do is get rid of Saleh. I always say this, usually the Jets are making their coaching changes at the end of the season. The easy part's getting rid of the coach that doesn't work. The hard part is finding the right replacement. And in this case, the Jets' pool of candidates was limited because you make an in-season coaching change, you really have to promote somebody from your own staff. So Ulbrich's going to get an early test here because there are lots of things he hasn't done before, and he doesn't have the typical learning curve of a normal new first-time head coach. Normally, you at least get a little time to think about this stuff. You get hired in January, maybe February. You have time to think through various things about how you're going to run your team, what you're going to delegate to your assistants, how it's going to be different from life as a coordinator because Ulbrich's got more responsibilities on his plate, so he's going to have to delegate more of the defense than he has in the past. You also have to think about how you're going to prepare your team each week, what the schedule is going to be like. And beyond that, there are just other things like how do you manage the game? How aggressive will you be going for it on 4th downs? There's a lot Ulbrich's going to have to pick up in a short time. And I'm sure he's thought about in the past, what would I do if I was a head coach? But now I don't think he was preparing to be the head coach this quickly. I mean, by all accounts, this move was made. This was a move that shocked people in the building. Nobody was expecting this. It almost felt like Woody Johnson woke up on Tuesday and said, "Yeah, what the heck? Let me fire Robert Salah." The more I read about this, the more it felt like Woody was just, I don't mean impulsive in the standpoint it was necessarily the wrong decision, just impulsive in the standpoint it doesn't seem like anybody was really anticipating this would happen, which means that Jeff Ulbrich really hasn't thought through how he was going to manage this team. It's an enormous challenge. This team, first of all, you're dealing with the spotlight of New York. You have, so many beat writers, you have talk radio, you have podcasts like this one, ready to second guess your every move. And now you've got to take over this team on the fly. This team that had big expectations, this team that has one of the most famous players on earth playing quarterback for you in perhaps his final season, perhaps his final run. It's an enormous challenge for Jeff Ulbrich. And these are the tests that we will judge him on. And it's difficult to say what he's going to do because he's never been in this position before. But these are the things that will ultimately determine whether or not he's successful with this team. And I think the first move is he's got to make some changes on this offensive coaching staff. There's no question about that. And I hope he's deputized to do that. And I hope that he sees the issues with this offensive coaching staff, because if they make these changes, it's not going to fix everything. It's not going to make Rodgers younger. It's not going to make the guys who have been underperforming play better. It's not going to fix the issues that frankly are on the roster right now, the holes on the roster that maybe you or I weren't anticipating heading into the season, but at least we'll get some better instruction on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, getting rid of Salah deals with some of the bigger picture stuff, the top level stuff, the high level management stuff that just wasn't getting done. But this offense needs to completely rethink how it's being organized. And so I think there are changes that are necessary. Lot of work in front of Jeff Ulbrich. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow unless the Jets do something else. So talk to you then.